Okay. That's really great to see everybody here, and I'll just say another welcome to Don and Lorna. And how we're hoping this will work out tonight is that I'm just going to open in prayer, and then I'm going to pass over to Julia to give an introduction to Don and Lorna. And then I'll start off with some questions that I have prepared earlier. And then we will open the floor to questions and then just have a short time of prayer at the end. So let's just come before God and pray. So, Father, we just thank you for bringing us all here tonight. We thank you that you are everywhere, that you are with each one of us in our homes. We just ask that as we come to this time tonight, that as you speak through Don and Lorna, we would be challenged. We would be challenged in our own faith journeys. We're going to be hearing about Don and Lorna as they have faced their different challenges in their faith over the last 4 years or 5 or 6 years, even in preparation to go to South Africa. And we just ask, Father, that you will help us to listen to you and what you're saying to ourselves, and we want to encourage Don and Lorna as well in the things that we feel you're saying to us that we can say to them. But we think of you tonight in just lay all of this before you and just ask you to be present in Jesus' name. Amen. So thank you, everybody, and I'm going to hand over to Julia. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Fiona. Don and Lorna have been members of BBC since 1999. They have 3 grown-up children and 3 grandchildren. Don is a chartered architect and ran his own company. And Lorna is a clinical nurse specialist and was a lead nurse in Gatton Naval Hospital. In 2014, they received a prophetic word that there was going to be a shift in their lives, which would involve change. The word specifically said that they were to wait and God would clearly show them the path. They shared this word with a few close friends and the church leadership. And during 2015 and 2016, God, through a number of unexpected ways, clearly directed them to South Africa and Cape Town in particular. In response to this call, 2017, they moved to Cape Town to start volunteer work. Don works for Ubu, which is a social enterprise business that builds sandbag houses and other buildings. Lorna works for New Day United, which is a Christian NGO involved with health and education programs in the townships. They are currently home for the birth of their 3rd grandchild, taking the opportunity to travel during a window in the coronavirus pandemic, and plan to return to Cape Town in early January to continue their work. Thank you, Fiona.
So we know that God spoke to you in lots of different ways. And what I was just wondering was, what was the most surprising way that God spoke to you?
Well, the first time he spoke was quite a surprise.
Should I go first? Yeah. I think for me it was an audible voice. It was a very clear, audible voice. When he specifically asked, "But would you go?" when we were praying about South Africa, and it was really awful because it was so clear.
Yeah, the "but would you go" was because 2 days before this, we knew we were going to be moving forward to try and answer a call as yet undetermined. And for various reasons, which we won't go into now, we had decided that if you know, the last place we wanted on earth for God to have us go was South Africa. And so it was 2 days later that Lorna heard that audible voice during a prayer time. We had a few people around to our house to pray about this, and that's when the audible voice came. So that's for you, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I could say, I mean, I think every way, in a sense, that God spoke to us was quite surprising. It didn't, as things went on, it didn't surprise us that he was speaking to us, because he had promised he was going to show us the way. But each way that came was always a little bit of a shock and a surprise, and the kind of variety of ways. I mean, at the other end of our journey, when we went to South Africa for a reconnaissance trip, and that was the trip we hoped God would let us off the hook, because we'd actually gone to South Africa. But we had a meeting with a woman from an NGO. We had a meeting with lots of people from different NGOs and different ministries there. But there was one meeting we had with a lady who really didn't know anything about us. We had an hour-long meeting with her, and at the end of the meeting, she basically quoted back to me a verse that had been on my mind for about 5 years before that. And she quoted it from the Message, and that's where I'd seen it. And where it impacted me. All the deacons will probably know this, because I went on relentlessly about this verse for 5 years before this point. But she quoted me a verse from Romans 8 that basically it's the verse where it says, "What's next, Papa?" in the Message, and basically they were living adventurously expectant lives. And it had always intrigued me. What was this verse? What did this mean, adventurously expectant? To be expectant in an adventurous way, you know, what did that mean? And this woman quoted this verse back to me. In fact, I said to her, she said, "I've got this verse in my mind from Romans 8, and I read it in the Message, and I said, 'Don't tell me, are you going to say adventurously expectant?'" And she said, "Yes." So there was lots of ways that it surprised us, the way God spoke to us, yeah.
And I think as well, there's so many stories, as you know, and I think we were talking about this the other day, and how that became normal. It became normal to have those
things happen.
And one brief story was we were in Mugduck, going for a walk after we had been to Cape Town. It was the first Sunday we were home, and we decided just to go for a walk in Mugduck. It was a beautiful, beautiful, clear winter's day, and we were walking up, like trying to process things, and we were walking along this path, and there was these two joggers running towards us, and as they ran towards us, Dawn and I stepped out off the path, so they ran between us, and the only words we heard, they were talking to each other, were "just back from Cape Town." and that, we were just like, did you just hear that? And that became almost normal.
That kind of stuff, yeah.
You know, there was so much of that going on all the time.
Yeah,
the context was we were walking to process the whole idea that the trip had convinced us we would be going back to Cape Town. So in the context of that was quite surprising.
Yeah.
Sorry,
no, I know. I think it's really so encouraging, and I just really want to expect God to talk to me, you know, every day like that as well. So thank you for sharing that. So here's a sort of double question. So did you feel as if you were prepared as you headed for South Africa 4 years ago? And as you look back, do you now think you were prepared?
I'll take this.
Yeah,
so yeah, we were just talking about this actually, to how to articulate this. But it was about a 2-year journey before we actually got to Cape Town, as you've just described, Julia. It was about a 2-year journey. And through that 2-year journey, okay, as we went through that 2 years, it became more obvious that we were going to South Africa, more obvious that it was going to happen, more obvious as we gave up our jobs and gave up our businesses and gave up our house, and, you know. And yeah, in a human kind of way, you try and work out why me? What is it? You know, but you look at yourself and you say, well, I'm an architect. I've got, you know, linear problem solving. You think about all the ways I've been a leader in the church. You think about all the ways that God might actually use you, And you go probably feeling, I'm pretty prepared for this. And then it hits you when you get there that actually your contribution is pretty meaningless, quite honestly. The problems are so complex and so vast that I really struggled for the first several months with the whole idea of what is it actually I'm doing here? What is the meaning behind this? And men, I think, particularly want to give themselves, they want to define themselves by what they do. So I've been defined for 20 years as the runner of an architect's business. And you desperately, when that's taken away, have to decide what is it that defines me? And as usual, we get it wrong. And really, all I can say is I think we both came to the conclusion the only thing that defines us is that God asked us to come. That's it. And maybe looking back now, 4 years looking back, we can kind of see the ways that God used what we could bring. There's a quote by a guy called Robert Sepukwe, who is one of the guys who struggled against apartheid, and he's quoted as saying, "I'm just a handful of capabilities in the hands of God." And it, kind of looking back, that's kind of the way it feels. We've just had to do what is in front of us, what God puts in front of us. We try to take it the same way as the journey to Cape Town. What's next? What is it He's going to put in front of us? And we'll just bring what He's made of us, really. And that's what it feels like.
Yeah, and I would say as well that, I thought what I was going to do and what I am doing are two very different things. And I spend a lot of time doing very, very basic things. I do some, well, not so much this year, obviously, but previously, lots of very basic training, lots of passing on information, lots of spending time with people, where I thought I was going to run a clinic. And I know now that is not going to happen. And actually, I'm okay with that. I wouldn't have been 4 years ago, because that's what I thought I should do, because that's what I did here. Now I do vegetable boxes, and I,
delivered food parcels.
I do lots of stuff with children. So
I think what you're saying there is you're adaptable.
Flexible, we like to say.
Flexible. Okay. Flexibly adaptable.
Blessed are the flexible, as we say in New Day.
Is that right? Right? No, that's fantastic. Now, I think that somebody's put a message up and a question, and it could be John. Is that yourself, John?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Do you want to ask that question, John?
Certainly, yes. My question is, how have you handled the distance and time away from your family, especially with the arrival of grandchildren?
Well, that's been difficult. When we were on our way to Cape Town, when we were making plans and preparing to come to go, we kind of went with our eyes open that grandchildren may possibly come along. And Ruth announced just a couple of months before we left that Freya was on the way. So as we left for Cape Town, we knew that was going to happen. And we went to Cape Town really not knowing how long we were going to be in Cape Town, because we were prepared, if we felt it the right thing and if we felt God still speaking to us, that we'd be there for years and years and years. We just didn't know. So it was difficult. I mean, technology has been wonderful, but it's not the same as a hug, as we all know now from coronavirus. But we found it really difficult, actually, I think. And we get really desperate to come home and see them. And then when we're coming home and see them, we feel as if we're starting kind of at a certain level. We're not really...
With our grandchildren.
Yeah, with our grandchildren. We're not really Papa and Gogo that they saw last week on a screen. We're somebody else because we're in real life. And we have to kind of start again a little bit. And probably more so even this time with Freya, who's now 3, and Sam, who's 2.5. So it's... it's been difficult.
Yeah, I think it is difficult, and I think we are really fortunate because our children keep in contact with us. We speak to our children, one of our children, I would say every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes more than one a day. And it's not long, it's just 5-10 minutes sometimes, or just a quick chat with Freya or a quick chat with Sam. And I know that we speak to our grandchildren and our children more than many of you who see them or who live just around the corner. So I always feel that is a thing that has happened because of what the circumstances we're in, and we're very, very fortunate for technology.
And how supportive our children have been of us, and before we even came, they've been nothing but supportive from day one. And even earlier on this year, when we were talking about do we come home at the beginning of the COVID, when no one knew how this was going to break, they were the ones that said, no, we feel you should stay. And we could have taken that the wrong way, but we didn't.
And also just when we knew that we knew that if we didn't come home when we did in March, we would be there a long, long, long time. And I was really struggling with that, and I went for a walk around the vineyards just before lockdown, because we weren't allowed out after that, and I was basically saying to God, really, you want me to stay? And what happens if it could be months and Ruth's pregnant, and what happens if this baby comes, and you can just imagine. And God very clearly said to me, but don't you trust me? And I'm going to cry. And I just thought, well, you can't say no, can you? When he asks a question like that. And all the way through being in lockdown and all the work that we've done, that was on the back of my mind. God has said, but don't you trust me? So I had to trust his timing. And obviously, as we all know, we arrived just the same day as Ivy, 12 hours after Ivy. So God had all the timing, but actually to be willing to accept that was really hard for me. And hard, I think, actually for Ruth. Ruth was very, very desperate for us to get home.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's a hard question to answer. So maybe I'll ask the next question if anyone else wants to put another question in the chat. While somebody's preparing a question in the chat, here's a question that I will ask you. So I don't know if this is a sort of follow-on question from that, but I just wondered that over the years, have you come across any particular stumbling blocks to your faith?
The last 4 years. I think my answer to that would be, if there's been any stumbling block to our faith, for me, it's been me. It's been my wrestling and struggling against what we've been asked to do, and my struggling against feeling I didn't have the meaning in life, the meaning as an individual. It might sound strange to you, but that's the internal feelings that I was wrestling with. That this is in the context of trying to go out into Cape Town, into the townships, into the work of Ubu, and trying to make sense of what it was I could bring, and trying to make sense of what it was that God would do through me, despite me. So I think I would say I was the stumbling block, to be honest. I can't really articulate it any other way.
And I think I would. The thing I really struggle with is the traveling. Believe it or not, when we travel, obviously I'm on my own, and I travel, and I'm in Manenberg in Guguletu, and it's awful. I mean, it's just awful. And then I drive out and I go, as I get nearer where we live, and then the roads open up. It's all trees, and
John and Trina will know this.
I struggle with that so much, and I keep thinking, why is it that I live in this side of Cape Town? Why? And it's really the colour of my skin and where I was born. So, why was I not not somebody else, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, the next question actually that's come up on the screen is from Alison. Alison, do you want to ask that question? Because I think it does follow on from what Lorna was saying.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, Fiona, yeah, and you've seen a lot of poverty and suffering, and you live very close to it. I just wondered, how's it impacted your faith and outlook? And I realise you've already touched on that, but in any other ways has it impacted your faith, just seeing the suffering day after day?
Do you want to take that one?
I don't think it hasn't, in terms of my faith, I wouldn't say it has, my faith has wobbled or anything because of it. I just question it so much, and I question, you know, and I know many of the answers, you know, it's man, basically, it's, you know, it's apartheid, it's greed, it's, you know, it's all those, you know, you can answer all those questions in that way, but it always comes back to particularly that last bit of the road where we come up the road and there's a lovely big hill, and then we turn up off the road and up another hill, and it's like, you know, why is it that I live here?
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's helped my faith. I think it has helped dramatically, actually, because we've come across so many people who live in that poverty, who, you know, and there's all sorts of crime reported, and there's drug abuse, and there's alcoholism and stuff, but there's a lot, hundreds of thousands of people just trying to make ends meet and just trying to feed their family and just trying to pay for their kids to go to school. We've come across many people in that scenario who are Christians, and their faith blows me away. The resilience, the grace, and I have to say, from a racial point of view, I've heard far more negative things from the white to the black side than I have from the black to the white side. And I think it has blown, it's made me question my faith, yes, but it's inspiring to see people who have that degree of spiritual resilience and are just clinging on to God by their fingernails sometimes, but they're clinging on to God. And the other thing it does is, you know, when I come back home, and even to some extent when I'm in, you know, as Lorna says, people live in Cape Town, it just makes me, it gives me a different perspective on things people see as problems.
Yeah.
And we now call them Western problems.
First world problems.
You know, because, you know, we don't have problems the way some of these other people have problems. I'm sure there are people in the UK who have very severe problems, but so don't get me wrong, I'm not whitewashing the whole thing, but it just makes me as an individual look at things very, very differently.
Yeah, so I think the next question from Moira might slightly lead on from that. Moira, do you want to ask your question?
It was actually me.
Oh, right, Roddy.
We've got a joint account that's in Moira's name. The first part of the question you've probably largely answered, Dawn and Lorna, but it was a two-part question. One was, how do you think your time in South Africa has changed you as individuals, and in what way have your thoughts and understanding of how South Africa changed and are different now than they were before you went?
Well, I think we kind of probably have answered the first one a bit. The first half, because we have changed. Obviously, our circumstances are very different. The way we live is very different. Our work is very different. But I think the second thing is that one of the things that we kind of feel quite strongly about, and which we hadn't really quite anticipated when we got there at first, was how important it is that we live where we live, and how important it is that we go to the church that we go to, and how important it is that we have the friendships that we have, because the majority of the people that we're friendly with are wealthy, not necessarily white, but are wealthy because of they live in the area that we live in, and it actually has been quite interesting how us being there, being part of, we go to a fantastic life group, has really challenged them. And it's not anything we've said, it's just our presence and the fact that when they found out that I went to Marienburg on my own nearly every day. I mean, they were like, you can't do that, Lorna. And I was like, but I do. So it's actually, I think we have challenged people more than we really realize how important that is, because the whole system has to change where we.
And we've been able to introduce people and we've been able to take people
Yes.
from where we live and from our church and so on, like the pastor and the assistant pastor and
Yeah,
stuff, into where we work and start trying to build relationships. We've brought people from the townships over to where we live to have, you'd call them barbecues and stuff like that, and mixing with people from our church. Yeah. And we just did that because that's kind of what we do. But it's, looking back, we can see that it's been quite important. But I think, how do we see South Africa, I think was your question, Rod. Well, I think we went thinking, I did a lot of reading before I went, and I think we went thinking we knew what the issues in South Africa were, and to some extent we did, but it's a many layered onion is South Africa. Every time you come across a new situation, you see a new nuance to it, you see a new perspective on it, you see a new hurt, a new wound that is going to take time to heal. And I couldn't even begin to start to describe the complexity to you. We're still discovering that. So we're very much scratching the surface of understanding how everyone sees everyone else in South Africa.
And every time you think, oh, I think I've got that now. And then there's another thing. You think, oh, here we go again. We have to try and work this one out and understand this particular scenario. And it's very, very complicated. So, because it's multi-racial, it's multicultural, it's multi, what else would you say? There's layers and layers and layers of complexity, really, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
Poverty, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. And the ability to understand each situation you walk into, you have to be very careful. It's been quite easy for us to ask questions, actually. That's been a good thing. We've been able to go into lots of situations and play the daft laddie.
I do that all the time.
And just ask, well, why is it like that?
How do you do that?
And to watch people struggle to articulate it themselves. Why is it like that? But there is so much complexity to it. And I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but we'll be here a couple of hours to go into that.
Yeah.
It has totally changed my view of South Africa.
Yeah. So another question from Alison, just about prayer, maybe prayer being changed. Alison, do you want to ask that question?
You go.
My question, yeah.
Alan.
So it was, do you find that you're praying any differently from when you first went to South Africa?
Oh, that's a question, Alan, isn't it? Thanks for that.
Sorry, no, you go. No. I was going to say that. I was going to say that actually before we left, there was so many things that happened. All those. I mean, many of you know many of the stories, but there's so many stories that happened that were obviously God incidents. That became normal, and then we went to South Africa, and then we kind of got back into the kind of normal way of life where you go to work, you come home, you make your tea, do you know what I mean? So we weren't really having the same
epiphanies all the time.
Yes. So I think in terms of a prayer, or for me, I think it's become probably much more what it was before, if that makes sense. Because I don't think we could continue to live at that level, because you would just be exhausted, actually, if that was happening all the time.
And I think the things that you're doing at work, the things that you're working with, and the issues that you're dealing with at work, and the frustrations and the obstructions and stuff, they're kind of relatively easy to pray about. Yeah. The harder thing is to pray for the people that you're working with faith. Because you want to see their situations change. You want to see their kids go to school. You want to see them not struggling for work. I mean, trying to keep people continuously employed by UBU is very, very difficult. And right now they're not working because of various things that have happened to stop our work momentarily. So praying for the situations and the people, praying for the people is hard, because it's sometimes hard to know what to pray for. It's easy to pray for everything to sort itself out, you know. But I think my struggle is I've just had an on and off struggle personally all the time, and Alan knows about this, which is why he's cheekily asking the question. That it's difficult how to internalize and how to pray through the changes that are happening in you, and to pray and to direct all these changes in the right direction, and not to
think it's you that's doing it.
Yeah, not to think that it's you that's doing it, not to think that it's you that's stopping things happen, but to trust God and say, I'm here because you asked me to come. I've come, and this is the situation that's in front of me. What do I do now? And we talked about this recently, not to ask God what we should do, but to ask him what we should know.
Yeah.
Because we're always tempted to ask, what should we do? What is the next thing to do?
Yeah.
But actually, we need to be asking God, what should we know about this situation?
Yeah. What do you want to tell me?
What's the understanding we should have?
Okay.
And that's something we've been challenged with.
That's very helpful. That's a bit wisdom, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Taking us a while. And I think from my point of view as well, I work for a Christian organisation, having never obviously experienced anything like that before, not even being allowed to talk about God at work, and obviously with patients and stuff. So to actually pray with your colleagues and to meet, we are very into, Don's always going on about how we're always having meetings, but we do spend a lot of time, talking, praying, sharing, and with the team, every Monday, with the whole team in Manenberg, and so that itself is lovely, because then you do then have a different relationship with your colleagues, and also you then get to hear about a bit of their struggles and what's going on in their lives, and it's really, we're there to support each other, and I think that for me has really, really been fantastic, and I think it's God knew what he was doing when he basically put me in touch with Lynn.
Yeah,
you do.
And I think for me that's been a different experience, because I've gone to work alongside a Christian guy, who I think it would be fair to say has been a bit of a maverick in terms of how he's trying to push things forward. God described us as two, he got a prophecy about me coming, which is another surprising thing that happened. Whereas we're the two pillars of the temple, I think it's in 2 Kings, and the pillars have names, and his name is Boaz, which is kinsman redeemer, and my name is Jachin, which is he who establishes. Now he got a prophecy of this before I even arrived. So there's a Christian ethos. We pray together, but it's not as routine and it's not as structured as New Day. New Day is very, very structured, and we kind of struggle through, and the relationship with me and Barry is we're quite different in many ways. I think we're quite similar in many ways too, but in terms of how we approach strategy and how we approach getting things done, and my kind of role, I think, looking back, has been to try and nudge this whole thing forward to becoming a social enterprise, not see ourselves as a poor NGO that can't really do very much, but actually structure a proper company that can be sustainable and actually provide profit to feed into projects. Well, obviously to pay the staff continuously and to feed money back into projects. So 4 years in, and that looks like it's beginning to come to pass. But sorry, I think I probably digressed. But that's kind of the struggle. Yeah. So a lot of that is what we struggle about in prayer as well.
Yeah, no, that actually leads on to the next question from John and Charmaine. Do you want to ask that? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I was just, well, Donna, first of all, thought of asking you how your central heating was, but I'll go on to something more serious. It really was about how the pandemic has affected things. And really, I suppose it's interesting about what you've learned from how people responded to the pandemic out there.
Yeah, well, firstly, John, my central heating is as well as can be expected. It's had a stable night, but we're looking for progress soon. Sorry, John has been helping us deal with heating problems, and it's just as well he moved in around the corner, poor John. Yeah, the pandemic, it was treated very differently in South Africa. And in some ways, what they did was they closed the country down very, very quickly. I think there was like something like 5 cases in South Africa when they virtually closed the country down. These cases had come from people who were on skiing holidays in Switzerland or something. And, you know, it was closed down with a real urgency. And it was closed down quite tight so that things were legally binding. So like wearing masks, there was curfews, there was alcohol bans, there was smoking bans, there was all sorts of things that were done to try and make the thing as workable as possible. And basically it did seem to work. So I don't think we've reached the number of cases in the UK. I don't think we've certainly not reached the number of deaths. And the second wave is not quite happening. There's a plateau being reached, and it's been there for many weeks now. And I look, you know, we've been looking obviously at what's happening in the UK, and we see confusion and ambiguity and nothing, you know, nothing really feeling like strategy. But what we are really surprised about, and I've said this to many of you, we're really surprised that the coronavirus did get into the townships, and we are astounded that it hasn't gone through the townships like wildfire. Because people cannot lock down there. They have to mingle. They may or may not be wearing masks, but they're certainly not distancing because there isn't any distance between them. They have to leave their shacks for the toilet. They have to share toilets with other families. They have to go out for water. They have huge childcare problems if they've got jobs. You know, all this kind of stuff. So. We've been doing food drops and stuff for quite a few weeks, and we've been in and out all the way through the lockdown into the townships. And to be honest, you might see a few masks, but you wouldn't know there was a lockdown. Yet the coronavirus got in there. We know there have been cases, but it has not gone through like wildfire. So thank you, Lord, because it could have been carnage. So that's what I would say. Anything to say about that? Food drops.
Well, I mean, I'm sure most of you probably know about the food drops, and New Day thought, you know, at the beginning, what can we do for people? And so many people have lost their jobs, and like many of them work for organisations that if you don't work, you don't get paid. There's no social benefits to speak of, so that it's a huge issue for the country. Lots of corruption, so the money that should have gone never got to the right people, and I mean it's just unbelievable. So New Day then had enough money for a couple of weeks to do food drops, so that's what we decided to do. We applied for essential service status, which we got, which meant that we then had permission to travel, because that you were stopped by the police. Basically, Don was stopped 3 or 4 times by the police, but had the permission. So, and then we realised that this was going to last a heck of a lot longer than everybody thought. So, and that's when the skipping challenge came. So for those of you who skipped and donated, that has paid the skipping challenge with Karina Craib's birthday, with Lynn's niece's birthday, and some other guy who I don't know but who knows New Day's 40th birthday, and everybody else has fed 60 people a week for 22 weeks. No. Just on that skipping challenge. No. 60 families.
Yeah. 60 families with enough food to last a family of 4 for 7 days. So that actually adds up to 35,000 people.
Yeah. And that was literally just with that one fundraiser.
It's amazing. And I think, you know, what you're basically saying is that the things that you had to stop with New Day, because you had to stop some things, you then took on something else that actually was worthwhile and what you needed to do at that particular time.
Totally. Yeah, and Ubu were closed down. We couldn't really do anything in Ubu because construction was and manufacturing was all locked down. And we didn't have a base at that point anyway. So I ended up.
You did things.
Working on for New Day as a driver, basically.
Super. So the next question is coming from Liz. Liz, would you like to unmute yourself?
It's actually John.
Oh, John.
Hi, Liz.
Yeah.
Hi.
I'm dialing it down on the serious level here.
Okay, sorry, John.
Apart from, you know, the important things like family and friends, I was just wondering if there was anything about Scotland that you particularly miss when you're away, whether it's food or television or sport. I know it's not the weather, so we'll rule that one out right now.
Well, actually, John, sometimes it is the weather, because sometimes it's just so lovely for so long in Cape Town, and there's so much sun and there's so much blue sky.
Our house is boiling.
We actually miss a bit of variety. I mean,
Yeah.
we do have seasons in Cape Town, which the longer we're there, the longer we're aware of the seasons. But when we first went there, it just felt like it was fine all year, you know. But I do miss a bit. I do miss a bit of the weather. I do miss the way the weather, you know. I don't know, trips up to the west coast and stuff like that. There's lots of really spectacular scenery in Cape Town. Much of it appears quite barren actually as you're travelling through it. But there's a lot of things I miss about Scotland. I mean, the intangible is it's just home, you know. And yes, it is friends and family, but it's also familiarity. I was saying to Lorna, I was really struggling before we come home this time because, you know, when the flights opened up, I just said, book a flight, just do it now. I need to get home. And I was trying to articulate to Lorna, and Lorna got it immediately, but driving in and out of where we work, you're always having to be looking over your shoulder. You're always being aware of what's happening around your car. You're always making sure your doors are locked. You're always just watching for the unexpected to happen. You're always, the driving on the road is just horrendous apart from anything else, but you're looking for other sinister things. And you've got to be careful always what you're saying when you're in community with people. You're always trying to understand. So there's a kind of wearing down, a kind of stress-related wearing down of wearying, kind of always being aware. And when we came back home, it's just lovely to drive down the road and not have to be like that. So that's one of the things I
think I would agree with that. We do live under a level of tension all the time. You know, there's always just a implied, really. It's not really, I mean, we've fortunately not really experienced very much, but it's just implied. But I think I just miss home. It's just because it's home, but also we have done hardly any traveling in Cape Town or in South Africa. We've done a couple of hours up the west coast, a couple of hours inland, and a couple of hours to the sort of east. And actually, I think it's very pretty because it's beside the sea. But I think if you took the sea away, actually, it's not really that pretty. And the towns are like one horse towns. It's like being in America where you just drive a long straight road and there's sort of shops and a few houses along, and then there's nothing for, in the next 50, 100 miles. There's a kind of barrenness, isn't there?
Yeah, what we find ourselves doing
community.
When we go to these towns is we find ourselves driving through the town saying, well, that's quite pretty. It's not really, not amazing. But then we are looking for
the harbour,
the township.
Yes.
We're looking for the township that services this town with labour.
Yeah.
And you turn a corner and go over a hill, and there it is, as far as the eye can see, the township. And every town has one.
Yeah.
And or maybe two. And so sorry, we're digressing.
Yeah, but also back to Scotland, I was just saying, they would, when you think about Ely and all these places up the east coast and North Berwick and even Oban and all those places, there's a centre, there's a heart to all these places where actually there doesn't appear to be any heart. There's not all beside the sea, but they don't have any harbours.
Well, I think the next, I don't know whether you've answered Graham Morrison's question, but Graham, do you want to put the related question to them?
Yeah, hi, Dawn and Lorna.
Hi.
Okay, so you nearly answered my question. My question is actually, what are you missing, and what will you miss about South Africa? And I appreciate what you told us about all the barrenness and the things you're not going to miss, but I'm also aware that South Africa or Africa can get under your skin a bit.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's easy. That one's easy. It's the people. It's the people. The relationships we've made, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I don't think we can actually envisage a time when we come home and never go back.
No.
I don't think we can envisage a time when we just come back home and we stop thinking about South Africa and we stop involving ourselves with what's happening there. But for me, it'd be the people.
Yeah, I think the people. I think the weather. I know we say it's not nice all the time, but I mean, I know this is really, really sad, but just to hang out your washing every day for like 6 months and it's dry in an hour. I mean, these are the sort of things, you know, I just love. It's just great. And the food is lovely. No, true, you never hang out.
That's not true.
Sometimes you bring it in. And you know, the food is lovely. The wine is lovely. The people are really friendly. All the people, regardless of where they live, are, you know.
No, not necessarily to each other, but
no, not to each other. No, but to us. So I think it will be hard to leave. I know, and that's really crazy too, because even this time it was hard to leave.
Yeah, actually Carol's got a really good question that ties into that. Good question coming up. Carol?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there are or will there be plans in place to train up staff to take over your roles when or if you eventually come home for good. And where are you with that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think. No, if you don't mind, sorry. Yeah, for New Day it's different because we are a bigger organisation. We have a guy called Ramon who is one of our. In fact, he was one of the guys that John baptised when he was out. He's an amazing young guy, ex-gangster, you know, fabulous young man, and we're always kidding him on that he's looking for Anna Marie's job. It's a running joke that, you know, he's obviously my colleague in South Africa. So there are plans for us to train up some of our young staff, but we don't want to hold on to them if they can develop and move on. So it's a very difficult thing to hold, because really we want to hold on to them, but we don't want to curtail them.
Yeah, Ubu's again once again is a different situation. So we're a much smaller team.
Yeah.
And I work very closely with Barry, but we have Sia and the Bonke James, who are a couple who work with us, and Talani and Aneli and Ziba, and so we have people who work with us, not continuously yet, as we're trying to get the social enterprise off the ground. But I think for me there are kind of obvious now issues. If we, for example, if we come back in a couple of years trying to get the social enterprise off the ground, I'm doing all the costings for the projects, a lot of the design work for the projects. I'm doing business plans. I'm doing cash flow projections. I'm doing all of that kind of stuff. So we are clearly going to have someone who can take that over, and we've recognised that, and we need to work towards that over the next year or so. But that's a challenge because we need the continual work starting to build up to fund that, because that person would need to be paid. Obviously, I'm not. So that would be the key thing that I would think of. But I think I'll still be, and I think Lorna will as well. I think we will still be involved. I think we will still be helping from afar, because it's quite easy to do that. I can do costs from here. I'm doing costs as we're here. I've done 4 costs for 4 different projects since I've been here, and Lorna's regular touch with her team too. So we can still have a role,
but it's not the same.
But for me, that the on the ground role of having their finger on the pulse of the finances of the company, that would be somebody who would take over.
But that's actually something that we can, pray for, like succession planning kind of thing. That's really helpful.
Indeed.
That's really good. Okay, John's got a question. John Craib's got a question about the issues over the last few months. John, do you want to ask that question?
Sure. Yeah. No, it was about Black Lives Matter, which has obviously been a big issue, especially in the States, with what's gone on there, and it kind of overflowed into the UK with the Windrush scandal and different things around that. And so it's been a lot on people's minds over the summer here. What sort of impact did it have in Cape Town, and how did people respond to that? Because obviously
Well,
around that are huge.
Interestingly, they didn't. Interestingly, it was like a subject that just seemed to be entirely ignored in South Africa. And that manifested itself in a number of ways. But for example, in our church, which we love very much, and it's a church, I have to say, that we have sat through some really squirmy preaching, which has been tackling some really thorny and difficult issues. Some of the more obvious issues in South Africa and some of the less obvious issues in South Africa that affect people everywhere. But we noticed that after the George Floyd thing and after the Black Lives Matter thing, nothing was said. And we actually, I have to say, but this is not something we do as a matter of course, but we actually wrote to the leadership of the church and said, shouldn't we be saying something, considering all the different other issues you're prepared to take on? We had a really good chat with the pastor, and it was decided that, well, not because we had done it, but apparently they were kind of working on it. It was just taking a while to work out what to do. But
and what to say. Because
it's a bit like the blue touch paper here. It's there are riots, and they call it toy here. There are kind of protests regularly where the motorways are blocked with burning tires, and there's people protesting about housing, about services, about education, obviously mainly in the townships and stuff. So it was almost like it was too difficult a subject to front up, to give more voice, if you like, to the existing protests. I'm still a bit puzzled about all of that, to be honest. I still don't quite get why people who are, because there's a lot of people who are really into change and transformational change in South Africa, why they didn't grasp that nettle. But it was, to our mind, it was kind of ignored.
Yeah, and I think it's just too difficult. It's too difficult for the white people to acknowledge, because if they acknowledge it, things are going to have to change. And actually, things haven't really changed in 25 years since apartheid finished. So I think that, and the problem is that, it is a black government, but they don't seem, the problem, it appears like the black government, the ANC, the people that are in power now are very corrupt, and so they're not really looking after the people that voted them in. They've now just behaved because they've got the wealth, they're not sharing that wealth. So actually that's what we mean about layers of complication. So suddenly the people that 25 years ago you thought this is great, we've got a black government and they'll be able to help people, and actually they've just treated the poor people the same as they did during apartheid, if not, to some extent, worse in some respects. So it's so complicated.
I think in the West, the racial issue is like an issue that is about attitude almost. Yes, it affects people's lives, as you go down. It affects jobs and it affects stratas and jobs and stuff like that. But it's like the differences are so stark here. It's like the elephant in the room, you know what I mean? It's like, it's so obvious that if things have to change in South Africa, the people who have the wealth are going to have to give some of it up. And there's going to have to be a recalibration of the whole economy for that to happen. And it's such an obvious, stark difference that is the thing that has to be tackled. And nobody really wants to tackle it, who have the power and the money. So that's
that's
sorry.
a difficult one. No, that's a difficult one. So there's one last question, which is coming from Alison, which I think we'll Alison, if you're happy to ask that question. Yeah.
I think Alan's going to ask it.
So
Alan.
just quickly, any authors or teaching that you found particularly useful over the past year or so?
Oh, what have I been reading? I'm trying to think. I'm terrible.
Well, I
with
speak then
names.
just how you're thinking. For me, it's absolutely
Oswald Chambers.
It's absolutely Oswald Chambers.
You say that.
My Atmosphere is Highest, which I started to read many years ago in the kind of original older kind of English. Didn't quite get anything out of it at the time, but I started when we were back home for Lorna's cancer treatment to do My Atmosphere is Highest in modern language as a devotional. And I keep on going back to it. It's just so challenging, so deep, and makes you think things through, the very fundamental things like obedience and submission and stuff that are really hard to tackle. And it's helped me because, as I've said to you, that's my kind of struggle. So Oswald Chambers, I would say, very much so. I know you're cheering me on, Alan, because I think Alan does something similar, but that's something that's been really important to me. And I keep on, I underline it as I'm doing it, and I'm going round it again and again. So it's actually, there's not much not underlined anymore.
I think for me, it's actually Alexa. Actually, has changed my life, because we have an Alexa which Don got last year, and for his birthday, it's the best present I've ever bought him for me. And I can just ask Alexa to play something. And so I think it's probably worship music for me more, which I would never do before because I wasn't at home much. So if I'm working from home, I would always ask Alexa to play something, so play Bethel or to play. She has a good Christian music. If you just ask her for some Christian music, she'll play a whole lot of different Christian music. So I think it's that has really changed. That's something that I had never done. I'd never done up until the last. Well, this year is better because I can just have a whole of Alexa choice.
These have been fantastic answers to the questions that we have put to you
great
tonight.
Questions.
They've been fantastic questions, and I think we really want to just thank you for sharing your complete and utter honesty from your heart. And we just want to say that we love you, and we are going to take the things that we've heard tonight, and that we're going to pray for them in our own time. And we wanted to give you the time tonight just to be able to express yourself and sort of get to know maybe some of the things that we maybe haven't been able to hear up to now. So we do really, really thank you. And what is there anything else? John's just going to close with a blessing, to pray a blessing over us. But is there anything else that you wanted to share tonight?
Well, we just want to say that, when we went out, I remember somebody saying, I can't remember exactly who it was, but I think maybe John Unnabell said that you're not going to Cape Town without us.
Yeah.
We're coming with you.
Thursday and Baptists are coming with you.
And that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
We do not feel the least bit unsupported. It was marvellous that the pastor came out to see us with his good wife. That was fantastic. But every day we do not feel unsupported, and we really, really appreciate all the support we get from you guys, in whatever form it comes. And we love you too. We just think it's amazing. I don't know how we could have done it without you, quite honestly.
No, we couldn't have.
So thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
And the others that haven't here.
Yeah, what a great evening we've just had tonight. And John, can I just ask you to close with the blessing?
Certainly.
You're taking up too much time for prayer now. You're taking up too much time.
Not at all.
Well, we did think of doing praying African style with us all praying at the same time, but it would be an absolute disaster on Zoom. So we
Okay.
decided against that.
Well,
So I'm going to read a blessing from Romans, the back end of Romans 8, where Paul writes,
Good.
I'm convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Death can't and life can't. The angels can't and the demons can't. Our fears for today, our worries about tomorrow, and even the powers of hell can't keep God's love away. Whether we're high above the sky or in the deepest ocean, nothing in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
There's a lot there. I will put up a recording at some point to remind you and to be seen by other people. But keep praying for Don and Lorna. There's so much there
Please.
to pray for. Yeah.
Please, we pray for you.
And I won't suggest everyone go and visit them. It was a fantastic time, but I don't want the whole of Buddhist Baptist Church to end up in Cape Town. So that's the end of the evening. Thank you so much, Don and Lorna. Everybody can clap in their own wee space. And we'll see you all during the week. Farewell.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.